smoke your hog, get out your bib, solid, picking a rib. Out the keys to a barbecue and start picking a rib.
And it kept on picking.
Good for them, good for me and you, so let's start picking too. Old King Cole came out of a hole by picking a rib. Picking, smoked the hog on a red outlaw, called it a barbecue. Say, stomping chicken, we've got a new creation. Say, you better start picking 'cause barbecue's taking the name.
Welcome back to Pickin' and Flickin' in the Nostril Zone, where I pick books off my shelf and flick through them. What else could that mean? I'm your host, cartoonist Kyle Bridget, and before we get into it, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. Now, if you clicked on this video because you read the title and you're interested in what we're looking at today, let me assure you that that is what we're looking today, and we'll get to it in a few moments. But before we get to it, I want to look at the container that it's in, and I'm going to play coy until then. So rest assured, in just a few moments, we'll get to what the episode is about. But first, we're going to look at this thing, which is the Comics Journal, issue number 262 from August and September of 2004. And the thing that we're looking at today, which you can't really get anywhere else except in its very original printings, is inside this issue of the Comics Journal. And you already probably know what that is from the title and the thumbnail and whatnot. But I do just want to talk about the Comics Journal broadly, because I think it's a great publication, and I think it's worth looking at what you can gain from reading it. Now I have a pretty decent sized stack of the Comics Journals, but I'll just show you this one right here before we dig into the one that we're looking at. You know, it's full of interesting articles and interviews, as well as reprinting stuff that you've, often never seen before. I used to love picking them up before I went on an airplane. They have a lot of dense text, but like a variety of stuff. So it keeps you entertained for several hours, and it's just well done. Now, I wasn't reading the Comics Journal as early as 2004. I think I started probably in 2006. But I picked this one up for the aforementioned, or rather not yet mentioned, except in the thumbnail and the title thing that's inside this. But before we get that, let's just see what else is in this particular issue. Oh, I've got some reflection, some light reflection here. I'm still very new at this overhead camera thing. Hopefully it won't play too big of a problem. The thing we're looking at today is on matte paper, so that shouldn't have too much reflection, but I'll do my best to keep this watchable. Here, maybe I better zoom in before we get into this. Okay, so I always like seeing this ad. It's got my local comics store actually contributed to it, so Strange Adventures is up there in Nova Scotia. So this is mostly a boilerplate issue of the Comics Journal. You've got letters, comics news of the day, reviews of recent publications. Kind of the big feature in this is an essay on Alex Toth, and then they've got some great reprints of his work. Unfortunately, they put it on this glossy paper. Normally, when they did a reprint of a comic like this, they would have used matte paper. So that's kind of unfortunate, especially for our purposes. Well, that's a really powerful image. This just good looking stuff. It's a real value add. The Comics Journal, great articles, great essays, great interviews, great reprints, And this issue also has an interview with an editorial cartoonist, Steve Brodner, who I believe is a New Yorker guy. So, it's even without what we're looking at today, this issue is definitely worth picking up. As, I would suggest picking up any issue you come across, especially if you get a decent price. But there's something in this one, as I keep mentioning, that really puts this issue over the top. And it's something that you can't really get anywhere else. And it's by my favorite artist and writer team, probably. Certainly my favorite Mad contributors of all time, Harvey, Kurtzman, and Will Elder. Goodman Beaver Goes Playboy. So Goodman Beaver, it was a comic that appeared in Help magazine, which Harvey Kurtzman was editing in the 60s. He was kind of like a typical teenage character like Archie, but going out into the world, I guess kind of your typical college character. And, he's kind of out in the world having different kinds of experiences, doing kinds of different jobs. And often, it would be kind of like cheeky and silly and topical. I just love all the chicken fat here. That's a word for all the little details and jokes in the background. And in fact, Will Elder coined the term chicken fat. And he said that, chicken fat, it enhances the flavor of the soup, but you have to be careful because too much will kill you. So you can, as I have, get this Goodman Beaver collection, which was put out by Kitchen Sink Press in 1985, I believe, 1984. But the problem is, it's incomplete. It's missing Goodman Goes Playboy. Now, it was originally published in Help. I'm not sure which issue. I'll get all that information shortly. But it was originally published in this little paperback called Executive's Comic Book, which I had a copy of, the original, and you can see it's just about the size of like a regular little sort of cheap comic paperback here. I had a copy of this, but I stupidly gave it to my co-idiot on Potter ZB, the Potter ZB podcast, the comic book nerdcast that dares to ask what may worry. And I assumed that I had it in the Goodman Beaver collection. But it turns out I was wrong. It's missing. And so I actually have this Guandanaland printing of The Adventures of Goodman Beaver, aka Executive's Comic Book. And they're like a self-publishing or like a digital publishing print-on-demand company that print, vintage comics and magazines from whatever scans are available. And unfortunately, this collection, they're all blown up. And it might look okay on the screen here, but when you actually hold the thing and you look at it, it is quite digitized and low quality. And that's the thing about Guandanaland is, you buy a Guandanaland book because you can't get something better. But, God love them. They're available. And so in here it has Goodman Goes Playboy. And so, of course, we can see it here because this is just a reprint of Executive's Comic Book. But the whole story concerns Goodman Beaver coming back to Riverdale and encountering his old friends, Archie and Veronica and Betty. And Archie Comics sued. So outside of Executive Comics Book, it was unavailable. The only way you could get it was to have the original issue of Help, which I'll look up in a minute, or Executive Comic Book. That is until the Comics Journal reprinted it about 20 years later. And that's what we're going to look at now. All right, so now I just have to find it in here. This is a problem with the Comics Journal. It's got so much great stuff in there that the second you want to try to find something, you can. It's in there somewhere, but it's buried. All right, here it is. So it opens with a review of the Will Elder collection that had come out right around then, which was called Will Elder, the Mad Playboy of Art. It's like a big coffee table book. I really need to get a copy of it, but it's big and expensive, so I haven't found a good deal on it. It's like 392 pages. Even then, the price then was $70. And it was edited by Gary Groth and Greg Sadowski. Gary Groth is actually the editor of the Comics Journal. And then this article here sort of goes through the circumstances of Goodman Goes Playboy and, why it wasn't printed again after Executive's Comic Book. And where it was originally printed and stuff. But there's a little too much information here to parse at a glance. So, maybe I'll actually just edit in the issue information and sort of the printing history here. I want to try to avoid doing a lot of editing on this show, but They'll save that for Canonically Crumb. But I think with this particular comic, because of all the chicken fat and details and, the history, I think I probably am going to have to do a little bit of editing anyway. So let me just part the sea here, and I'll be back in a second. All right, nostril heads, here's the skinny. So, as you just saw, Goodman Goes Playboy was published originally in Help and then later reprinted, slightly altered, in Executive's comic book. Archie Comics, as I mentioned, sued and actually ended up getting the copyright on the work. And so that's why it wasn't reprinted. Archie Comics actually owned this thing. But turns out the copyright lapsed around the time that this was printed, so I guess around 2004. Gary Groth caught word of it, and so he's reprinting it in the Comics Journal. And an interesting thing he says here is that once is satire, twice is infringement. And I guess that's kind of an axiom of copyright law. And of course, he's referring to another Archie parody by Harvey, Kurtzman, and Will Elder, which was Starchy. Arguably one of the most infamous articles from Tales Calculated to Drive You Mad, which was the precursor to Mad Magazine. This is from Mad number 12 in 1954. This is incredible. We'll have to look at this someday. Anyway, getting back to Goodman Goes Playboy. In this installment, Goodman returns to Riverdale, scene of his youth. Typical carefree days. High school proms and milkshakes at the soda fountain. Crew-cut youths flirting with pretty girls in ankle socks. Healthy, typical teenagers, good-for-nothing loafers. And as Goodman approaches, he's got his bags with him. He says, there they are, the old gang, still buying milkshakes at the soda fountain, probably discussing the prom and the hop, the school football game, and other such healthy, typical teenage pursuits. But actually, they're talking about all of this sort of highbrow, sort of fancy stuff. So we've got Reggie saying, I'll tell you what sets the Ferrari apart from the Maserati 5000 and the Aston Martin. Take the Ferrari at Le Mans. And up here, they're talking about Lenny Bruce and Mort Saul and, everything that was hip and chic in 1962. The sort of avant-garde. And Goodman says, Archer, Joghead, Veronica, still the same old typical teenage crowd I left 5 years ago. But, something feels a little different. And they say, when did you get back from the continent? Did you stop at points in Paris for a Chateaubriand? We were just arguing as to whether their Béarnaise sauce is better than La Pavilion's. And so, even though he's been out in the world and they've stayed in Riverdale, somehow they've become, cultured and sophisticated. And so, there's so much good chicken fat in here. I like how they're, the back of their sweaters combined to make a pin-up. So Goodman Beaver, he's, asking his friends, well, what do you like to do? And they're like, oh, well, we love to read. And he says, oh, I love to read too. I hear that the Affluent Society and Advice and Consent are two books that must be read to be aware of the current political and economic climate. And he's been reading Collier's and Reader's Digest. But they're like, man, what are you reading? The new awareness is all right here in this fold-out. And they're holding this impossibly long Playboy Playmate fold-out. And her head is covered with a KKK mask. Jughead's pushing this kid away here. Yeah, they've been reading Playboy. And, Playboy is kind of, presenting itself for the, urban sophisticate. You can get your Norman Mailer articles and, articles about hi-fis and skin diving and also oogle some girly pictures all in one convenient package. And Goodman says, well, I'd like to borrow that to study later, but, I got to find a place to stay. And Archer invites him to stay with him and Veronica, but Goodman kind of puts his foot in his mouth and he's like, oh, you two are married now? What? You're not married? How can you live together if you're not married? Oh, do I hear the pitter-patter of little feet? And this is the wrong move because Archer tells him, well, actually, Veronica's not my girlfriend. She's my playmate. But it turns out Veronica's not as into the whole playmate situation as she might have previously let on. She says, "Oh, Goodman, stop it. It's true, sports cars and penthouses are no substitute for a wedding ring, children, security. Find another volunteer to be your playmate, if you can, you rat." And Archer calls back, "Playmate of the month, baby." And of course, all these women back here are running, saying, "We volunteer, we volunteer." And there's, Miss Biannual, Miss Weekly, Miss Book of the Month Club, Miss Goodyear, Miss Play of the Week, Miss Foldout. They're all running to be with Archer. There's even a woman popping out of the front spoiler of his car. And Goodman's like, "I can't understand what was bothering the Mrs. Arch." And Archer's like, "Don't worry about it." And there's like a Betty here hitchhiking. It says LA or bust. Anyway, so they have to speed off because it turns out that Archer's car is stolen. And they arrive back at the penthouse, and we get a taste of what Archer's Playboy lifestyle is all about. And it's quite the wild party going on as Archer warns Goodman, "I think before we go inside, I should tell you that my parties are pretty wild." And Goodman's like, "You make it sound like you're having an orgy in there." And of course, that's exactly what's going on. It's like this hedonistic Roman orgy. They're like swimming in a pool full of caviar, or I guess probably grapes. And even the lifeguard is making out. And there's just debauchery and hedonism going on everywhere. Archer really lives it up. And there's some great chicken fat in here. There's this big fat, Dionysian Caesar character. There's this guy who's like Hermes, messenger of the gods, chasing a girl around the pool. Now, you really shouldn't run around a pool. That's a little risque. But and speaking of, Rome, there's also, the Wolf Mother from Romulus and Remus. It seems like it's dispensing drinks up here. And the whole thing is just wild. It's just a wild happening scene here. Even Whistler's mother is naked back here. Oh, this is the real freedom land. All right, and Beaver is very confused by all this stuff he's seeing. And there's a chef with an apron that says hot stuff, bringing out a fried woman. This is pretty intense stuff. And so as they're coming in, Betty and Joghead are leaving. And they're saying, "Sorry, we got to go take care of our kid." And Goodman's saying, You're having a kid? When was your marriage?" And Joghead says, "Tomorrow. The doctor just told us about the kid today." And they're being led out by Betty's dad, who has a shotgun. Over here, Archer's, showing him the lifestyle. He's got shelves of women, just like there's a guy shopping with a cart. And then the news comes on the radio, and Goodman rushes over, and he says, "I was hoping to get to a radio in time for the 7 o'clock news." And Archer is just like, "Oh, the 7 o'clock news, blah. The news is such a drag, Goodman. Try something more relaxing. Let me introduce you to some girls." And Goodman says, "Oh, I guess I'll just go relax on the corner couch over there with those girls that are all curled up." And right away he's like, "Hey, say, you got some great books over here. Literature, math, history of the Roman Empire." And Archer's just like, "Oh, my university textbooks, ugh." And then Goodman says, "This is just like the Roman Empire." And Archer says, "History's bunk, Goodman. Which makes you think this is like the Roman Empire?" And of course, he's reading The Decline of the Roman Empire, and it's literally the scene he's looking at right there, right in front of him. And I'm backtracking a panel here, but I really like this Paul Gauguin reference to this painting of the native girl that's passed out here with all the liquor bottles and saran wrap. There was actually a Toulouse-Lautrec reference earlier, so a lot of highbrow art history references in here. All right, so getting back to it, Archer says, "What makes you think this is like the Roman Empire anyway?" Oh, by the way, later we got some great fun. You see, we got these lions and we throw these Christians. But Goodman says, Archer, all kidding aside, this party, this penthouse, all these refreshments and sports cars and things, how can you afford them? I like the people running in the background, like this woman covered in stamps being chased by a guy in a post office hat. He's like a male pervert, I guess. So, Archer kind of takes this opportunity to kind of brag and show off all his great stuff. You know, he's got wardrobes full of clothes, rooms full of the finest hi-fi stereo equipment, bar accessories, a Porsche, a Bentley. You know, and as for girls, I've got closets full, trunks full. And Goodman says, all these girls, won't their fathers get mad? But Archer says, they're expendable girls. Cars, clothes, everything. I can replace it all in 2 seconds. And you want to know where it comes from? Ha ha, I'll tell you where it comes from. I've signed a pact with the devil. That's where it comes from. Ha ha ha, in exchange for my soul. And I'm living it up because my time is up tonight. Oh, what makes you think this is like the Roman Empire? As he's playing the fiddle as his penthouse is burning. And, you know, Goodman's outside. He's got a blanket around the fire crew's there. And Reggie's like, it's not your fault, Goodman. Jughead said, it's shock. It's all just hitting him. But what's hitting him is Goodman saying, Betty, Jughead? How can they have a kid if they're going to be married tomorrow? And the next day, Goodman Beaver returns to the sock hop. And since he was the last one to see Archer alive, everyone wants to know what happened. And Goodman says, and the last thing Archer said was that the devil was going to claim his soul. Reggie scoffs. A pact with the devil? What nonsense. But this guy over here in the shadow says, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. That's a Hamlet line, and he's looking like a silhouette out of a Toulouse-Lautrec Moulin Rouge poster. And we can see Archer's soul is in this jar here. And they put the whole thing together, and it says, that thing fluttering in the bottle, what is it? It sounds like Archer's voice. It's Archer's soul, and it's the devil that they're looking at. And so, of course, they all sign up to get the exact same deal that Archer had. And there's some good cartoon chicken fat in here. You've got Andy Gump and Superman and, you know, the guy from Bringing Up Father, and some Cats and Jammer kids in here. And Goodman says, I think it's time for me to leave, to find a place where the dark forces aren't closing in, where honor is still sacred and where virtue triumphs. Then again, maybe I should sign up. And that's Goodman Goes Playboy, as reprinted in the Comics Journal number 262 from 2004. And if you want to get the complete Goodman Beaver, you've got to pick up the collection, Goodman Beaver, which has Goodman meets Tarzan, Goodman underwater, Goodman meets Superman, Goodman gets a gun. And you got to pick up the Comics Journal or Help number 13, I guess, if you want to get Goodman Goes Playboy. Now, this is a little hard to rate because I'm not really rating just Goodman Goes Playboy. I'm rating the Comics Journal number 262. And it's a good one. You know, it's got that Alex Toth stuff. On the whole, I think I would give it, as an issue of the Comics Journal, a 3.5 Nostril rating. It's not my favorite issue of the Comics Journal. You know, if it had something other than Goodman Goes Playboy, it would probably be like a 2.5 issue for me. But, you know, it's kind of a personal thing. Like, this has got more kind of like mainstream comic information in it, whereas, like, you know, I'm more interested in stuff that's got like old newspaper reprints or stuff like that. But, you know, again, if you want the Goodman Beaver, you got to pick it up. So that's all for today. Remember, you can sign up for my Patreon, where you can get early access to Pickin and Flickin in the Nostril Zone and Canonically Crumb. As well, you'll get thanked at the end of the episodes. And if you don't care about that, well, you can just flick off.
a rib.